Hey, F you. Excuse me? ZZY, it's the Fuzzy Mike with Kevin Klein. The Fuzzy Mike Podcast.
Hello, and thank you for listening. I'm going to flat out tell you, this episode, it ain't for everyone. And I know it. But I also know it's for a lot more people than you think. We're talking about depression and suicide. And we're going to laugh. What? Yeah, that's how my guest and I cope with our own diagnosis. And one of the many things I love about hosting this podcast, as opposed to when I was on the radio, is that here, I can be the real me. I can share my true sense of humor. You've heard of dark humor before, right? Mine? It ain't dark. It's pitch black. And my guest for this episode is Frank King. He's the mental health comedian. I've wanted to have him on for a long time, and we finally make that happen today. And he and I have the same mental health diagnosis. And in trying to explain it to friends and family, I have quoted one of his jokes ad nauseum. Now, I'm not going to say it here. Obviously, I'm going to wait for him to tell it because, well, it's his joke. So if you're brave enough to sit through this opening, you'll be rewarded with a real comedian who wrote for The Tonight Show with Jay Leno for 20 years. But first, this is something I wrote not too long ago. It ties into Frank's appearance. I thought I'd get on stage and perform this one day, just so that I could see people's reaction. Look, when I tell a joke, sure, it's great to get a laugh. But I like a reaction just as much. And embarrassed, disgusted, and angry, well, they're all reactions. And when I did this for my wife, she hated it. Reaction. I did this for my brother when the whole family got together for Christmas last week. We laughed our asses off. Better reaction. So if you want to laugh, go ahead. You won't be alone. If you hate this, go ahead and hate it. You won't be alone there either. Don't you hate it when people talk about their families? So my dad committed suicide. Yeah, we were just as shocked as you. The dude I grew up with wasn't crafty at all. Yet he somehow figured out on his own how to make a noose. He had to figure it out by himself. You can't really ask for help when killing yourself because, well, then there's an accomplice. You think you fucked him by leaving him, right? Well, now you just send him to jail. Suicide is a solo activity, and you better get it right the first try. My brother pointed this out to me. It's illegal in some states to kill yourself, so you'd be eligible for prison if you miss. Yeah, what are you in for, buddy? Aggravated assault. What about you? Self-aggravated assault, I guess? Look, if you try to kill yourself and don't succeed, you'll have people monitoring you so much it'll make Google jealous. Believe me, I know, because I've been to the hospital twice to stop me from doing something. With my dad, though, we should have seen it coming. 4 relatives on his side of the family had killed themselves, making him the 5th. To me, this proves suicide is not selfish. It has shared itself with several generations of Kleins. Plus, he had a tough job. United States Postal Service letter carrier for nearly 40 years, and the stress of that job was heavier to carry than his own mail pouch. So, we'd tread lightly. That was one of his favorite sayings. Better tread lightly. Sometimes it was said playfully. Well, once. Most times, though, it came via a tone similar to, I don't know, Freddy Krueger at an Elm Street sleepover. Look, when my dad was on, he was one of the funniest, silliest, and smartest people in any room, regardless of whom the other guests were. But Dad's on days, no, they were about as frequent as a day without a Kardashian story in the news. I long thought that I was the traceable cause of this misery. You see, I'm the firstborn. I'm the kid who, by my very appearance, told my dad, "Yo, Dad, your money just got cut. Again. And your schedule is now dependent on my schedule. So basically, Dad, your life, well, it's over." And in April 2005, at age 63, his life really was over. I got the call from my mom telling me she found Dad in the basement. She swears that my brother's reaction and my reaction were the exact same. A very deadpan, "You've got to be shitting me." Dad's compassion gene passed on to another generation. But once the news sank in, I had some questions. How did he do it? Did he leave a note? Well, the answers I sought weren't what I expected. No, he did not leave a note. My dad was a wordsmith. I still feel cheated that he didn't leave any final words of wisdom, nor any parting shots. And how did he do it? Well, he hanged himself. He didn't use a tie or a bed sheet or a belt nor a rope. These are all things tried and true throughout the annals of suicide by makeshift gallows. So if he didn't put a tie, a rope, a belt, or a bed sheet around his neck, what did he use? An extension cord. I still shake my head to this day. I don't know where his mind was at the time. I mean, did he see the poetry, the irony that he shortened his life by using a device intended to lengthen? It even has the word extension in its description. If you're cringing, well, thanks for reacting. And I know, I get it. It's terrible. He ruined a perfectly good extension cord. But as tragic as all this is, there was a silver lining that I was able to glean. In times like this, you try to find something, anything other than, well, at least he's not in pain anymore, so that you can mend and move on with your life. So while I was on a red-eye flight, time of day, not from tears, see, I was flying to get home to my mom when it suddenly hit me. My spark of an idea at 37,000 feet on how to turn this negative into a positive. Thanks to Dad, I now knew exactly what to get Mom for Christmas that year. A brand new extension cord. Hell, Dad ruined the best one they had. And we need a new one, just in case either of us boys decided one day to carry on the
family tradition.
In the news, California regulators voted on new rules to let water agencies recycle wastewater and put it right back into the pipes that carry drinking water to homes, schools, and businesses. The bottled water industry called this the greatest Christmas gift ever received. While it is an innovative way to aid in drought relief, I do have to question California's new tourism slogan. California, we have water. Tastes like ass, but we have water.
That coffee tastes like shit. What'd you do? Take a dump in it?
North Korea's state newspaper published pictures of Kim Ju-ai, the 10-year-old daughter of Kim Jong-un, overseeing a missile test site. Kim told the paper that the move was the initiation of his new policy, take your daughter to Global Destruction Day.
Go ahead and bomb us, Kim Jong-dong. We dare you.
And finally, George Santos, the disgraced Congress member from New York, says he's made more money in 7 days than he would have made in an entire year in Congress simply by making personalized videos on Cameo. Sure you have, George. Liar, liar, liar. No surprise, though, that Santos is working for Cameo, is that's also how people refer to his short time in Congress.
It was a good ride while it lasted.
As I mentioned in the opening, I've wanted to talk to my guest for quite a while now. He wrote for The Tonight Show for 20 years, and he's a regular presenter on TEDx. He's the mental health comedian, Frank King. So let's save some lives today, buddy.
It's Saturday. It's a holiday weekend.
It's a holiday weekend. This is a rough time of year for people that struggle with depression.
That's true. However, the spring, I think April is the month when more people die by suicide than any other month of the year.
Why is that so?
I don't know. I don't know if it's because it's spring and everything's coming back to life. They know another year has passed. But the rates of depression, even in people who are neurotypical, if you add it all up, I think it's up 38% between Thanksgiving and New Year's.
What does neurotypical mean? Because I hear you say that a lot in your TED Talks.
Well, I used to say normal, and people go, "Who's normal?" Okay, how neurotypical? Just the average. Neurotypical or not neuronormal, neurotypical or neuro something. There's another one like that where it's just, and everybody is a little off, but not like
Not like us.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that kind of off.
I have wanted to talk to you for a long time. I was diagnosed 2 years ago with the same diagnosis that you have, chronic suicidality.
Well, you were fortunate that your therapist knew what that was.
Right.
I was recording my dry bar comedy special in Provo. A friend of mine came with his brother. His brother had been a therapist for 20 years. And he asked me what my mental illnesses were. And I said, major depressive disorder. And he nods. And I said, chronic suicidal ideation. And he stared at me like a pig staring at a wristwatch. He had no idea what it was. So I explained it to him. And then you can see him going through this mental Rolodex of his patients. He goes, oh my God. Over the last 20 years, I've had at least half a dozen patients who presented with symptoms like that. I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah, I don't think it's in the DSM-5. Maybe we'll make it 6.
Probably not. You have a joke that I have been stealing from you for over a year and a half now. When I started to look up chronic suicidality to find out, what it was, your TED Talk came up. And the joke that you use to describe what we go through every single day is how.
Yes. How? It's not, is it the one of them about my car, or
that's the one?
Yeah. So I say to the audience, for me and people like me, people in my tribe,
your tribe,
the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. When I say small, a couple of years my car broke down. I had 3 thoughts unbidden. 1, get it fixed. 2, buy a new. And 3, hell, I could just kill myself. That's chronic suicidal ideation. And
there it is.
I always tell that story in my keynote. And I think almost every time there's been at least one person in the audience who has it, chronic suicidal ideation. They don't know it has a name. They think they're just some kind of freak, completely alone. I had a young woman come up after a college presentation. She said, thanks for your keynotes. You're welcome. I said, but I got to tell you, it made me weep. How did it make you weep? Well, your story about the car, get it fixed, buy a new, and kill yourself. I said, yes. She goes, I've been having those thoughts all my life. I didn't know that had a name. I thought I was just some kind of freak and completely alone. And then when I heard you say you have that too, I realized for the first time in my life, I am not alone, and I wept. So there's the ROI.
Well, here's an ROI for you also. My brother's 22 months younger than I am. And he did not know this until yesterday. We were together for the holidays, and I told him that I was going to be talking with you, and I told him that joke. And instead of him weeping, he started cracking up. And I'm like, yeah, it is a funny joke. He goes, no, that's how I fucking feel every day. He's like, there's an actual name for it? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I can't wait to listen to Frank. So you're going to help him understand who he is, and you're also going to help the audience understand how we get through every single day with that in our mind.
Yes, and as I do an improv, yes, and I have a friend who owns mortuaries.
Oh my God.
He said, talk about a dark sense of humor. Dear Lord. He got a t-shirt that says, my day begins when your day ends. Yeah. I'm sitting next to him at a Chamber of Commerce function. Very somber. The guy on stage is talking about how, for all of us, someday our time will come as to die. And he leans over into my ear and he goes, he makes that sound like it's a bad thing. All I can do to keep my composure. He's just a twisted. Pee Wee Herman
Pee Wee Herman did what?
He sent me a text that said Pee Wee Herman didn't die of a heart attack. He died of a number of strokes. Anyway,
you have to know Pee Wee Herman's past in the movie theater episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, for sure.
But he said, I asked him to take suicide off the table. And I said, no, dear God, don't take suicide off the table, because just shove it to one side. Because if you take away that out, I would have killed myself a long time ago if it.
Well, you tried.
Yeah. Chronic suicidal ideation. It's, but let me tell you this, I'm 67 now. Walking the dogs the other day, and the thought of suicide, not doing it, but just the topic crossed my mind. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm 67. Why rush it?
True.
If I was 37, staring at 40 years, okay, we can talk about it. But 67, how long can it be?
Yeah. Well, you've lived 4 years longer than my father. He was the fifth person in his family to off himself.
Wow. Well, it runs, as you probably noticed in my TEDx, in families, generational depression, suicide.
Yeah. You had a great grandmother and a great aunt.
No, my grandmother and my great aunt. Yes.
Okay, so I had it backwards. But the great aunt story is one that you use in your comedic repertoire.
Yes, and I have to warn people ahead of time because it's horror movie horrible. Would you like me to recount
Absolutely. Yeah, because what I want to envision with this conversation, Frank, is I want people to understand that it's okay to laugh.
Yeah.
You have to laugh. Before you came on, I did a whole comedy monologue about my dad's suicide. Okay? I mean, people say a dark sense of humor. Mine's pitch black.
Yeah.
I mean, he used an extension cord to hang himself. He shortened his life with a device that was used to lengthen. Right?
Yes.
So that's where I'm coming from. So you can't offend me. You can only help.
Well, and if you saw my first TEDx, A Matter of Laugh or Death. My origin story. And by the way, nobody knew I was depressed and suicidal until that moment when I came out on stage.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Okay. Now, there was people asking about humor. You're a comedian. When you talk about suicide, where's the funny? Where are the jokes? There are no jokes. They're just funny personal anecdotes.
Mm-hmm.
As I said in my TEDx talk to the audience, I said I went on TED.com to research to see how other people handle the topic of suicide. Figuring there'd be dozens of talks. There were 3. And then it hit me, and I said to the audience, well, duh. You're really good at suicide. You're not going to be recording a TEDx talk. At which point they realized that this is going to be a little different. Well, my great aunt, my mom got worried because at her age, and she had glaucoma, I think. She was losing her sight and didn't want to be a burden. And so my mother couldn't reach on the phone. So she bundled me into the car at 4 years old. We went over and let ourselves into the apartment. And nothing was out of place until we got to the kitchen. And then all the food that should have been in the refrigerator, the old lock type, not a magnetic strip, but a latch, was on the counter. She didn't realize what had happened. My great aunt had decided to end her life, crawled into the refrigerator, pulled the door to behind her, and once you're in there, you're
in.
Yeah, and so, but apparently at some point she changed her mind and tried to claw her way out. So you can imagine broken fingernails, blood. So my mother goes over with me holding onto her skirt tail, swings the door open. My great aunt falls out of the refrigerator and pins me to the floor. We are face to face, our face frozen in that last minute of horror. Somebody said, have you been impacted by a suicide? I go, yeah, the bitch fell out of the refrigerator on me. and my grandmother died using gas stove. My great aunt, a refrigerator. I told the audience, look, what is it with me and my family and major appliances? I drive past Home Depot, I tear up. It's
right.
That's where the funny is. It's just personal, funny anecdotes.
Yeah, and it's our way of coping. It's our way of dealing, because a lot of people, like you said, your friend wanted to eliminate suicide, and you're like, no, just push it to the side. Because if you eliminate it and you eliminate talking about it, then people do feel like they're isolated and on an island.
Yes, and have no other choice. So it's it's something that needs to be talked about. Fortunately, it's being talked about more and more.
But why is there such a stigma on mental health still?
Well, because I believe there's a stigma on mental illness and a separate stigma on thoughts of suicide. I believe what's happening is back in the day, 5, 6, 7 decades ago, when I'm not sure when Alcoholics Anonymous was formed, but at the time, alcoholism was considered a moral failing, a character flaw, not a disease. And I think for a lot of people, that's where mental illness and thoughts of suicide fall these days. It's some kind of, if you were stronger in Christ. I saw, oh man, I saw somebody had a sticker on their car. You know how they do it, like they wrapped it, but it was just on one door. It said, I got a picture of this. It said, Jesus won. I'm thinking, dear God, what did the loser get?
Right. We're talking to Frank King on the Fuzzy Mic. You can see Frank on TED, on his TEDx talks, but you can also go to the mentalhealthcomedian.com. And that's where I have spent quite a bit of time. I thought when you got on the screen with me, I'd be like, Frankie, because I feel like I know you so well because I've watched all of your TED Speaks and everything you talk about is so personally intimate.
Yes, and that's I believe is my superpower. When I go on stage as a man, especially, seven or eight out of 10 suicides in the U.S. daily. I mean, 7 or 8 suicides in the U.S. out of 10 are men these days. So if I'm on stage and I'm telling these intimate details and I'm being vulnerable, Brene Brown said vulnerability is a superpower, and that I do believe is one of my superpowers. It gives people permission, especially men, to give voice to these feelings and experiences. I had grown men come up and weep. I had a young man, I was on a construction site, actually on site for a big Cincinnati construction company. And I always allow 30, 45 minutes after I'm done with the keynote to take individual questions or hear stories. So there's half a dozen guys lined up. And the last guy was a young African-American gentleman, probably mid-20s. And he's crying so hard he can't speak. So I waited. And when he gathered himself, I said, "What's up?" And he said, "I've lost 3 people close to me in the last year to violence, one of whom was my daughter who died in my arms." So I knew the HR guy wasn't standing far away, so I waved him over. And I said, "Look, you need to take this gentleman by the hand, go get the Employee Assistance Program binder, the EAP, find a mental health facility and get him there today because he is circling the drain."
Yeah.
3 months later, I had another reason to call the meeting planner, and I'm terrified to ask. Finally, I got up my courage and I said, "Whatever happened to that nice young man? Frank, he was evaluated, medicated, back on the job." Oof. But I don't think he'd ever told anybody any of that until
Right.
I got up and told my story, and that he felt like he could tell me and I wouldn't judge. And
Now, here's a very interesting thing about you that I can piggyback off of that story right there. In your TED Talks, you actually give out your real cell phone number. And you say, if you have a situation, give me a call, day or night.
Yep.
How big of a burden's a terrible word, but how big of a responsibility do you feel by doing that?
Well, it doesn't happen often. The calls don't happen often. I'll tell you the funniest one.
Even
here.
if one call happens, though.
Oh, no, it happens. And I was
Yeah.
talking to a guy, and he said he was suicidal, depressed, suicidal. And we're chatting away, and he said, "I got an Amtrak schedule." So I'm not sure that if you didn't know much about suicidal mental illness, that might not trigger an alarm. I said, "Look, I'm not going to tell you not to kill yourself, but I am going to ask that you not do it that way, because undoubtedly the engineer will see you, be unable to stop, and you'll kill yourself and destroy the engineer's life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't take somebody with you." Now the funny one is, the kid called me. I sounded like a young man. He goes, "Dude, is this your real cell number?" I go, "How bad would the karma be if I put a number on the screen and said, if you're suicidal, call 988. If you're having a bad day, call this number." I said, "I'm a comic. I'll make it worse for you. Hold, please."
Right.
And then I tagged it with, "You know what song I would play on the hold music?" I said to him. He goes, "No, another one bites the dust. Then another one gone." No. Just
Did
sick.
he laugh?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Of course he did. Of course.
I was doing it in New York for a big construction company, Turner Construction, and a huge developer in New York. It was like a 50-story building downtown Manhattan, right on the river. I'm again on site, and I offered, I'll do general Q&A and then I'll do it afterwards. Well, the next morning I wake up, turn on my cell phone, and there's a text from a New York area code that I don't recognize. And it simply said, "Can I get that number for help again?" So didn't want to ask during general Q&A. Didn't want to be seen talking to me after the event, but because he had my phone number.
Yeah.
So that's why I do it. It's some people are very uncomfortable for good reasons sharing that kind of thing. And in some states, many states, there's the Baker Act,
Which is
means
what?
if you're actively suicidal and the police come, they'll take you in front of a judge, and the judge will decide whether you're going to be held for 3 days in a mental health facility with no belt or shoestrings. So that's another reason people don't. If you say that to your therapist, "I'm suicidal," they're bound by law to report that, and you have to go before a judge to see if you're going to harm yourself.
Have you ever been put in that room, that situation? I have.
Oh, dear God.
Not for 3 days. I was there for like 24 hours. Okay. And it is just a hospital room, nothing in it. I mean, you're there because you're thinking about killing yourself, and they put you in a room where all you can do is think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, how about a television, an iPad, anything?
And then they have a sheriff's deputy on the outside of the door who checks on you every 5 minutes. You okay in there? Well, yeah, I mean, there's not jack shit to do in here. So, yeah, I mean, I'm the same as when I came in. I just don't have the apparatus to do anything with it.
Well, and I had a conversation with a gentleman whose wife's, I don't know if it's her nephew. He died he died of an overdose.
Okay.
He was schizoaffective, and which is often hard to keep people on their medication when they're dealing with that. So very much like bipolar disorder, it's very hard to keep them on because once the medication, you begin feeling like a normal person or a neurotypical person, you go off. So he decided to self-medicate, bought meth, and no opioids. And so for some reason, he sat down on his haunches by the window. So he's picture that his butt's on his heels, and nobody checks. It's a halfway house where they're supposed to keep tabs on these people.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody checked on him for 24 hours. Well, because he was sitting like that with his knees, with his butt on his heels, it stopped the blood circulation to his lower legs. Ended up losing his lower legs. And yes, and they took him to the hospital, and I think he was unconscious, put him on life support. And the doctor said, look, one of two things can happen. Either we can bring him around and he's going to be an opioid addicted double amputee, or we can just take him off life support and let God decide.
Yeah.
So they decided to take him off life support, and he passed away. So they called me because they were grasping at straws. We want to do something. We want some kind of initiative. Nobody should be left alone for 24 hours. And there aren't enough facilities, and there should be mental health education in schools, starting in elementary school. And the police should be trained in CIT, crisis
Intervention. Yeah.
Yeah. I said, look, you have to pick one because it's a big job.
It is.
So I turned them on to NAMI, National Alliance Mental Illness.
Yep.
I said, look, go to your local chapter. It's all volunteer driven. If you tell them you want to do something, they'll say, great, you're in charge. Plus, they have the structure, and if it's a big enough chapter, or
the resources.
Yes, and at the state level, they've got a lobbyist to deal with the legislature. So I think that you pick one of these, or go see them, and then decide which one you want to work on, and whether you should form a nonprofit or not, and then go from there. But they wanted to do something, but they had no idea where even to begin.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're dealing with the overwhelming loss, number one. And then number two, there are so many different avenues that you can go. But yeah, NAMI's probably the most recognizable and probably the most successful, I think.
And they're going to sue the company that runs a halfway house.
Okay.
He should have never been left alone for 24 hours.
Right.
And so they're thinking about if the suit goes through, and it's going to take time. But if they win money, then they'll form the nonprofit and use that for capital to begin the nonprofit.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Do you talk about anything else in your life other than depression and suicide? Because I got to think that, I mean, you are the mental health comedian, but you have to have other interests outside of this.
Oh, yes. I don't speak on anything else. When I coach speaking, how to make money on cruises at colleges, corporations, associations. And the first thing I do with my clients, I go, all right, what one problem do you want to solve? One. Okay, now what businesses have that problem? And what associations do they belong to? The idea being, rather than having a half dozen keynotes, become the expert or thought leader in that lane. Pick a lane. You can save the other keynotes for breakouts or workshops, but yeah, I think you need to be known for that. So that's why I chose, and suicide prevention was obvious. Somebody go, how'd you pick suicide as a topic? Well, topic really picked me.
That's like a stray dog.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just showed up one day, and so yeah, and it's very rewarding and therapeutic, and it's I forgot what we were talking about.
Do you struggle daily?
No.
Okay.
Every now and then, my cycle's 3 days,
Okay.
72 hours. I used to say I fight depression, but that's not correct.
What
Fight
is
it
correct?
and win. I can lose and kill myself. I can tie and be like, kind of an uneasy truce between North and South Korea. Or, there's no winning.
Right.
So yeah, but it's a 72-hour cycle. I know when it starts, I'm going to be flying level again in 70. I just ride it out. I quit fighting it. I ride it like a wave. I think of myself on a surfboard. I'm riding the wave of depression. It's very, it's got a lot of energy. So rather than oppose it, Aikido is a martial art I've taken some of. And the whole idea is you blend with your opponent's energy rather than
they come at you, you absorb it.
Yes, exactly. And so that's what I try to do is blend with that energy. Now, one of the reasons I don't have that many bad days is because, and this is the takeaway from my keynote, I think everybody neurodiverse or neurotypical should have a self-care plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one. It's diet. I'm on the keto diet, and I do intermittent fasting. Exercise at least 5 times a week, sometimes 6.
You're a bodybuilder, aren't you?
Yeah, I've done 4 bodybuilding contests.
That's awesome, buddy. Congratulations.
Thank you. Well,
physique looks tremendous. I've seen it. I've seen the pictures.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, well, the problem is, I was talking to one of the guys I competed with, a young guy. I said, the problem is, if I got my clothes on, nobody can tell. He goes, Frank, there's a name for that. It's called a pump cover. You're covering up your pumped up muscles. So I think I'm going to write a book someday called Undress for Success, Look Good Naked.
There you go.
But diet, I do the keto diet, I do intermittent fasting to get my body fat down for the contest. I do, and because carbs, I don't like that cycle, that up and down cycle on carbs. Diet, exercise, good night's sleep. I think people discount. It always worries me when somebody says, I get down 3 hours sleep a night. Oh, dear God.
Yeah.
That
luck will run out.
Yeah. Diet, exercise, good night's sleep. Meditation. I meditate twice a day following a meal. It's called the cat napper. It's a guided meditation, takes you down, brings you back up the other end in 30 minutes.
Okay.
And medication. I take a little bit of medication. I got lucky, and the first one I was assigned worked.
Wow.
But I tell people, look, if it's not working for you, and 2/3 of them, 1/3 of people love it, 1/3, okay, last third is awful. There's a new DNA cheek swab test. They take your DNA and they try to match it to the psychotropic that will work best with your metabolism. A couple $100. Go on the web and put depression DNA cheek swab test. You'll find them. So it narrows it. You don't do so much of the lab rat. Go on, doesn't work, taper off. Go on, doesn't work, taper off. So, but I got lucky. The first one they gave me was, actually, so here we go. Diet, exercise, good night's sleep, meditation, medication, masturbation.
That one. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's my favorite TEDx talk.
Yeah, but if you're Catholic, you're going to just rack up so much guilt.
Yes, I actually speak to that in the TEDx. It's called Mental Health and the Orgasm: Treat Your Depression Single-Handed. I love my iPhone, but it's my second favorite handheld device. And they read that and said, you don't have to audition. You're going to do it.
Nice.
I talk about world religions. Buddhists don't care unless you're a Buddhist monk or nun. And then which explains why every statue of Buddha you see, his hands are in his lap and he's got a smile on his face. Yeah, and I said to the audience, tell me you're going to be able to walk by a statue of Buddha without going.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Was it Protestants? Even though it's not a sin in the Bible, it is attached to one, which is 7 deadly sins. I think lust is lust. It said they don't like it because masturbation is often linked to sinning, and I thought, often? When the hell else does it happen?
Yeah, right.
There's some guy right now in Michigan watching ESPN going, oh, the Lions won.
Yeah.
Besides, it's a victimless crime. The Catholics. This. I thought this was going to get the audience to boo. I said the Catholics, of course, any sexual act that doesn't lead to
Procreation.
yeah, is improper. And I said to the audience, yeah, well, let's face it, who knows more about improper sexual acts than the Catholic Church? Well, maybe the Boy Scouts.
Well, wow.
Yeah. And let me tell you the last joke, and I got a standing ovation. My wife said, "Don't do that joke." I said, "I'm going to do it. It's going to kill." So the last thing I said to them, because I'm talking about orgasms, oh, men who masturbate more than 21 times a month have a 20% lower rate of prostate cancer. 21 times. I said to the audience, if 21 is the threshold, right at this moment, I'm immortal. And get this, the selection committee said, you need an action item for that fact, Frank. I said,
action item.
You think I need to encourage men to do this? And I'm telling the audience how this conversation went. So I said to the select committee, okay, I'll give them an action item. Fellas, with that information I just gave you about prostate cancer, beat it like it owes you money. And then moved on. The last joke, and this got the standing ovation, I think. I mean, it's good all the way through, but I said to the audience, do you guys know why they call an orgasm an orgasm? And they're looking at me like, no. I said, because nobody can spell. Standing ovation.
Very nice. Very nice. How did you deal with, because you mentioned earlier that until you went on your first TED Talk, nobody knew that you suffered from depression and suicidality. So in 20 years as being a comedian and a writer for The Tonight Show, how did you hide it?
People with mental illness, I've discovered, are good actors. I've got a SAG card. It's a SAG-AFTRA. I mean, I'm a pretty good actor. As a matter of fact, the best worst audition I ever had was because of that. My agent called me. We live in Eugene, and in Portland, they used to film Leverage with Timothy Hutton. They were con men and women who went straight. And he said, I want you to go to Portland and audition for Leverage. I said, great. What's the part? He said, it's an assassin, a former CIA MMA badass. I said, dude, look at me. Does any of this scream badass to you? So I decided the only way I was going to have a chance was to Nicolas Cage the audition. Go in character, don't break character as the assassin until you get back to your car. So I had a gray Calvin Klein t-shirt, a jean jacket. I bought some badass looking military sunglasses at Big Lots and went up there. And the nice young lady at the desk, when I went to sign in, I signed in. She said, do you need anything? Where's the shitter? Bathroom in military parlance. And she took her a second. She go, oh, over there. So I go into the audition. If you never audition, usually there's a camera in the center and a casting director on either side. They read their part. I perform my part, a couple lines. And then they said, now take the sunglasses off and do it again. And I cocked my head and went, no. They said, thanks for being in touch. I get back to my car, break character. My phone's ringing. It's my agent. I go, did I get the part? He goes, no, man, it's worse than that. What I had done, Kevin, was I decided to let that part of my personality that's been trying to kill me for 6 decades to shine through in some way, as if it was coming off me in waves. And he goes, no, you're banned from the building. Why am I banned from the building? I don't know what you did, but you scared those 2 casting ladies so bad, they said he cannot come back in the building.
My gosh.
And he said, what did he say that scared you? And she said, no, one word. So I said to my talent agent, okay, do we both see the irony here? If you look like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or Liam Neeson, it's an easy casting job. You could easily be a hitman, former CIA. But me, 165 pounds, soaking wet, nicest guy on the planet. And I scared them so bad, they won't let me back in the building. Wouldn't you give that guy the part of the assassin?
You damn straight.
Well, and he said, you know what, Frank? If by chance Quentin Tarantino had been producing that episode, you'd be working the rest of your life just for the choices you made and the fact you stuck to character.
Yeah.
So best, worst audition.
Why do so many performers have mental health issues and still go into the performing arts?
I think I did a whole TEDx on it called Mental Benefits, the Evolutionary Advantages of Mental Illness. And it starts like this. What if those of us with mental illness are not living with a genetic mutation, but an amazing evolutionary adaptation? And what if, as Malcolm Gladwell says in his book, David and Goliath, of such things, that mental illness is a desirable disadvantage. You would never wish it on anybody, but it comes with some advantage. I kept meeting people super talented in one area, but they had a mental health challenge. And I thought to myself, this cannot be a coincidence. Alexander Hamilton, they believe, was bipolar from the historical record. He'd write for days on end, then sleep for nights on end. He was hypersexual, which is a bipolar trait. So I did a whole TEDx on Kanye West. I mean, his politics aside, he's one of the several geniuses, musical geniuses of his generation. Too bad he's not a PR genius.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I believe, Kevin, that my depression and suicidal thoughts are just the flip side of my comedic ability, creativity, and there's a reason when somebody heckles me that I can say something back literally without thinking. I was doing a show on Carnival Cruise Line, and the Late Show, and I mean they're drunk and they came for an oral fist fight, and so you can't. And so I grabbed the microphone. I haven't said a word. The guy in the front row screams out, "You suck!" I gave a beat and I said, "You fucking swallow."
Nice.
Standing ovation in the first 20 seconds, and then I couldn't do any wrong after that. I'm doing a thing at Charlie Goodnight's in Raleigh. They're throwing a woman out. She'd been sitting in the front row, got really drunk, was harassing everybody. Finally had her going out the door. I was facing away from her because I didn't want, and she starts to turn back. And because I'm figuring she heard her name or something that sounded like drunks are voice activated. So she screams, "Fuck you." And I waited a beat and I said, "Not even for practice." People came up afterwards. How'd you think that up? I didn't think it up. The first time you heard it was when I heard it. I have no idea where that came from. But I think I can teach you to write, stand up, and perform it. I cannot teach you to think.
Yeah.
And use the incoming information the way that I can, turn it around that quickly on a
yeah, it's a gift, and I've gone to enough comedy shows to see who has that gift and who doesn't have that gift. Some of my favorite comedians, all three of them died in the same year: Norm Macdonald, Bob Saget, and Gilbert Gottfried. And what I loved about Saget was he didn't have a script, he didn't have a show. It was just whatever he wanted to talk about, and he made it funny. Harlan Williams does the same thing. He just talks to the audience.
Yes, and the comic you were just talking about, Bob Saget.
Mm-hmm.
I was a doorman in the world of comedy at the Comedy Store in La Jolla, California, a branch of the one on Sunset. And Saget used to come down there all the time as a headliner. And I mean, dark and
Oh,
dirty
God, yeah.
and funny. The problem for him was if he had a show in Vegas, those middle class and middle America people who come to Vegas for vacation would go looking for the guy who hosted America's Funniest Videos or Full House.
Yep.
And I don't know if you ever saw the series Entourage.
Uh-huh.
But there's a scene there where they want Bob Saget to do something for them. I think Ari Gold wants him to do something for him. And he says to Ari Gold, "Okay, I'll do it if I can fuck my wife on your desk." That's Bob Saget.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. That's right.
Bill Burr is my current favorite American comic. I can't believe I never heard of him until a couple of years ago, as funny as he is. A friend of mine said, just go to YouTube. So I went to YouTube, and I think the first thing out of his mouth was, my mother said, "Why can't you be more like your father?" So I said, "Fuck you, I'm leaving." I think I'm in.
Yeah. Yep.
And there's a guy in England named Jimmy Carr.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He goes, was it the one I heard was, he's brilliant. It's really well written, but just filthy.
Yeah. It's about a child. It's a child abuse joke. And I can't remember it, but it's been called the most crass joke on the planet. Yeah. And I wish I could remember it too, because it is out there.
Oh man. And no holds barred. I mean, he talks about, he goes, people with Tourette's syndrome, wonder what makes them tick. Yeah. I mean, just no concern for political correctness or woke or whatever.
Nothing. You talk about this in one of your TED talks, and while we're talking about comedians, Robin Williams obviously tragically died through suicide, and everybody was like, "Well, what could he possibly have been upset about? He had all the money in the world?" Explain that to the audience that it ain't about that.
Yes, and I often do this in my keynotes. As a matter of fact, I always do it in my keynotes. I say, when somebody like Robin dies, and I worked with him a couple times. When Robin dies, or Naomi Judd, or Kate Spade, or Anthony Bourdain, who've got the world by the tail, every reason to live, I get text, emails, Facebook messages. Why would Robin Williams want to kill himself? Here's the deal. I believe the majority of people who die by suicide don't want to kill themselves. I believe they simply want to end the pain. And that comes as a revelation to a lot of people.
That's what I told my brother the other day, last night when I was talking about you. I said, Dad probably didn't want to die. He just wanted to get out of that cycle. Whatever he was going through that day, he just wanted to get off that carousel.
Yes. And fortunately, I've been through my depressive cycle enough, and those thoughts of, get my car fixed, buy a new one, or kill myself. It's not really. I think I could get financing for another vehicle.
Probably so.
Yeah. So it's not a serious. A young woman, I did a teaser for my breakout session at a big electrical contractors conference, and I walked out in the lobby, the foyer, and a woman chased me out, and she has chronic suicidal ideation. She had no idea her name. And she goes, "There a medication for that?" I said, "For the depression, but I don't think there's a medication for chronic suicidal ideation." But I said, "Here's the good news. A, you don't have to act on it. And B, I believe it's just a coping mechanism. It's you're under stress and your brain says, 'Hey, listen, I got an idea. You're not going to like it, but it'll solve the problem.'"
Well, my therapist told me that it's actually a good diagnosis because people with chronic suicidality ideation are less likely to kill themselves because we think about it so often.
Yeah. And and I joke about it so often. I was doing a keynote, and in my keynote, I say, I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like.
Huh.
Spoiler alert, I didn't pull the trigger. And a friend of mine came up after a keynote recently and said, "Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I said, "Hey, man, can you try to sound a little less disappointed?" Yeah. Oh, and by the way, on that didn't pull the trigger, having a gun in my mouth, a psychologist came up to me after one of my presentations, and he was, all bowed up. What qualifies you to talk about suicide prevention? You're not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or whatever. I said, "Well, I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like." And in the silence that followed, I said, "Listen, Chief, I could go to school, to college, and learn absolutely everything you know. You will never know everything I know."
Very true. What stopped you from pulling the trigger?
It was very practical. We filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy, lost everything. It was devastating my wife. And I had $1 million life insurance policy. So I thought, I can fix this. Because one of the three legs on a stool of suicidality. One, you've crossed the barrier where you can do it. Two, you socially isolate. Three, burdensomeness. You feel like you're a burden to your family, your friends, to the world. The world would be better off without you. Well, I knew my wife would be better off financially. She'd be heartbroken, but not broke. Had $1 million life insurance policy. So I called my agent and I said, "How long have I had the policy?" And he said, 22 months, and don't do it. Because he knew he delivered checks in the past after a phone call like that. So I had to wait. I had 60 days to wait to kill myself. Oh, well, I can wait 60 days.
The policy doesn't kick in until 2 years.
Yes, because it's called the incontestability clause. After 2 years, let's say you lied to the agent about smoking. You smoke 3 packs a day, but when you ask you the question and put the answer on the form, you lied. After 2 years, if they find out you've been smoking 3 packs a day, they can't. They have to deliver the $1 million. And part of the incontestability clause is a 2-year suicide clause. And I wasn't marking days off the calendar. I don't even remember day 61 or 2 or 3. Things must have gotten just a little bit better. The pain had eased up, but otherwise, if it had been like 25 months, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
don't things tend to work themselves out and get better if we just give it the time?
The good news is, with time and medication, things will get better. It's again
In that moment, you don't think so, man.
People with depression, myself included. I say this is a bit of a generalization, but we tend to think in the immediate. If life's not going to get any better than this, and I don't think it is, why bother?
But that leads me, what you just said leads me to one of my favorite things in one of your talks, and that is that your passion was comedy, and you were doing a job that you didn't like, and you were like, I'm gonna quit this. Please tell it. I'm gonna quit this job. I'm gonna do a comedic. Yeah.
It's my fourth TEDx talk, Suicide, the Secret of My Success.
Yes.
Dead man talking.
Yeah.
Again, that's the second TEDx that I didn't have to audition for. They liked the title, subtitle, and the idea so much, they said, no, you're on. And the reason Suicide, the Secret of My Success is that it was January. Well, I'll give you the way it starts. What would you do if you knew for a fact you had absolutely nothing to lose? What audacious goal would you pursue if you knew by not pursuing it, you would literally die? That's where I was in January of 1984. Married, miserable, wonderful woman. We just didn't belong together, but we had nothing in common. But you know what they say, opposites attract. She was pregnant, I wasn't. Yeah. But I married the wrong person. And then I was selling insurance, which is a great business, but not for me. And as I was driving down Highway 163, it was raining. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, kind of a low point in my biorhythms. I just had that thought, why don't you kill yourself? And then my second thought was very empowering. Now, wait a minute. I could divorce my wife, quit my job, try comedy. If it works, and I think it will, great. If it doesn't work, hell, I can still kill myself.
Like you said, it's always on the menu.
Yes. And I believe, and I can't prove this, the same thing happened with Kate Spade. I think she was working for a magazine like Elle or Vanity Fair.
Yeah, it was one of the bigger publications.
As an editor of the accessories section. My guess is she looked around and thought, you know what, I'm not supposed to be reviewing other people's fashions. I'm supposed to have a fashion line of my own. And maybe she thought, if I don't get out of here, I'm going to kill myself. Anthony Bourdain. Folks took him to France when he was 8 years old. Fell in love with food. All through high school, he worked in a couple of restaurants. He went to Vassar, I think, and worked in restaurants. But my guess is he thought, it's good school. I've got a good GPA. Undoubtedly get a good job when I get out of here. But this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be doing culinary. And I have a comedian friend, a woman. We're talking one day, and she goes, when I was working for the association in Washington, D.C., there were only a few high points during my week. It was when I went to open mic night. And she said that I realized, and I said, stop, I'll tell you what you realized. If you didn't quit that and start doing comedy, you were going to kill yourself. She goes, how do you know that? I said, I lived it. So I think that's somebody asked me, I said, look, it's like standing on the edge of a cliff, 10-story drop into a beautiful deep lake. Coming up behind you is a brush fire. If you stay put, you're toast, pardon the pun. If you jump 10 stories, you reach terminal velocity, but you might hit just right and swim away. So is it really a choice?
Yeah,
no. I said, let's say I had a twin brother. And here's the power in the suicidality. Had a brother, twins, both funny. He's married, miserable, job miserable, doing stand-up at open mic nights, but he's neurotypical. And he thinks to himself, I could divorce my wife, quit my job, try comedy. If it works, great. If it doesn't, oh my God. If it didn't, I will have lost everything. Well, I had nothing. Few things on this planet more powerful than somebody with absolutely nothing to lose. A guy called me up one time after I came back from Cambodia during the pandemic, and called me up and said, I'm coming to kill you. I know where you work out. I know what time. I said, great. Listen, before you come, add this to your mental math. I've been trying to kill myself for 50, 60 years, and I'm still here. And B, I don't want to die, but I'm not scared of it. Are you sure you want to come and take on a guy with absolutely nothing to lose?
And I'm a bodybuilder.
Yeah, and I'm a bodybuilder, and he never showed up. So, uh, yeah, but there's the power in having nothing to lose. I essentially burned the boats. There's no going back.
Yeah, as you can tell, I'm a big fan of yours, and I do. I truly love you, brother. But I do have to ask you, why were you going to go out messy?
Messy?
Yeah, with a gun.
Oh yes. Well, I still own the gun. It's a nickel-plated 38 Ruger with
Yeah,
federal hydroshock hollow points. You put that in your mouth, you're not coming back.
right.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted it to be, if it's going to be done, done. I don't want, because I've known people who've attempted and then they come back and they're somehow damaged.
Oh, big time. Yeah. I,
Talking about being depressed. A, you failed at killing yourself. And B, now you're a quadriplegic or whatever it happens to be.
yeah. So you have become that burden that you didn't want to be.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah. I want to kind of get away from this for a second. And this is just personally self-serving. What makes a good joke?
Oh, well, the truth. Somebody once said, advertising is the truth. Good advertising is the truth told well. Good comedy is the truth told funny. If they're not going to believe the premise, then they're not going to laugh. Brevity is the soul of wit, as my mother would say. You want to get to the punchline as fast as absolutely possible. And so that's what comics do. I got to tell you, I taught a class called Stand Up for Mental Health. David Grenier in British Columbia, BC, up in Vancouver, created a company that trains the teachers. And you have to have a mental health diagnosis to get in the class, and you have to have a mental health diagnosis to take the class. So it was part comedy class, part peer counseling.
Uh-huh.
Because there were no neuronormal, and neurotypical people in the room. And those people, Kevin, were the funniest on the fly. The stuff that came out of their mouths needed no editing, ready for prime time. Can I give you a couple of examples?
You please.
Yeah, Lisa Ann, she just come from an AA meeting. She was double diagnosed. She had depression and alcoholism. And she goes, I go, what do you got for me, Lisa Ann? She goes, I think Christopher Columbus was an alcoholic. Really? Why do you think that? Well, let's go through this. His big idea was to sail west to get east. I mean, doesn't that sound like something you come up with at a bar? And then he did it. And when he got to where he's going, like an alcoholic, he had no idea where he was. And when he got back, like an alcoholic, he had no idea where he'd been. Okay, now here's the kicker, and it just sent me into hysterics. He didn't know where he'd been, and he got a woman to pay for it twice. I mean, that I know comics been doing it 20 years, can't write a joke that tight, and it came out of her mouth that way. I had a young woman who had bipolar disorder. And I go, what do you got for me? She goes, well, my boyfriend last night said he wants to break up with me. Well, why do you want to break up with you? Well, he said he wants to see other people. What did you say? I'm bipolar. Give me a minute. Okay, and here's my favorite, and this is really dark. Camille was her name, and she had her backstory. I mean, it was her dad sold her into white slavery.
Oh, Jesus.
8 years old, and it just got worse from there. So I go, Camille, what you got for me? She goes, well, I went to see my psychiatrist. Yeah. And he said, are you depressed? I said, yes. He said, are you having thoughts of suicide? I said, yes. He said, do you have a plan? I said, I got 5 plans. He said, 5 plans? I said, yeah. You want to hear them all or just the ones that involve you? Oh, my God.
Wow.
And that's the way it came out of her mouth. No editing, most comics neurotypical write a joke and it's like a page. You have to go through and redact, 3/4 of it because none of this is necessary to move the narrative forward. So that's the key. You need a good premise that people will believe. And then you just have to write a punchline. I think Judy Carter says there are 4 things. What's hard about this? Not what's funny, what's hard, what's weird, what's scary, and there's a 4th thing. So what she has you do is for 30 minutes, you write down everything you can remember from your first memory as a child.
Okay.
I did that. And then she said, from there, you find your premise. So I said, I grew up in a neighborhood, all girls. I didn't even know Little League Baseball existed. We played horses. The problem is when you get to junior high school, no equestrian team. And And when we played doctor, because it was me and like 11 women, there was always a line. It's like playing HMO. That's the way. By the way, if you're listening and you want to write for whatever comedy, it's called the New Comedy Bible.
Hmm.
She has exercises. You don't make up jokes. You take your real life, whatever happened to you, and make it funny.
Yeah. You basically you're embellishing actual things that happen to you.
Yes, or somebody else. I'm going to be doing that 12th TEDx talk on December 30th in
12. Wow, man, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Even dozen. And the theme is climate change environmentalism. Well, I don't have a lot of jokes on that, but so I'm lying in bed because I lie in bed usually an hour in the dark after I wake up after I had a double shot of espresso, and that's a very creative time for me. And I thought, oh, I got the opening joke. There are people on this planet in the United States who don't believe in climate change. Now we can argue about the reasons for climate change, but the climate is changing. I mean, ocean temperatures are going up. The ice caps are melting. I've been to Antarctica twice. I've seen it.
Oh, wow.
So, but they do believe that John F. Kennedy Jr. is coming back from the dead to run as Donald Trump's vice presidential running mate. A, Kennedy, vice president? I don't think so. And B, if you come back from the dead, I'm guessing you could have just about any job you wanted. So John F. Kennedy Jr. could do any job he wanted. Well, maybe not airline pilot.
No, no, probably not.
Yeah, and I'm going to get a boo on that. And I'm going to go, oh, too soon?
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, so
But you bring up an interesting point there. A boo is a reaction. That's great. A reaction is good. Laughter is great. Yeah. What do you do if there's no reaction?
Well, and I've had shows like that. My first cruise on Holland America, they called me with not many days to go and said, we had to fire a comedian. Can you fly down to Fort Lauderdale? We'll fly you first class. Your wife can come along. So I went. And it used to be in like 2009-ish, it was a Christmas cruise. And nobody liked working on the Christmas cruise because the people on the Christmas cruise were people nobody else liked. What happened was people would think, listen, instead of giving grandpa and grandma knickknacks or bric-a-brac this year, why don't we send their drunken asses on a cruise and get them away from the Christmas dinner table? I'm on a boat with 2,500 people and nobody can stand. So I go up to do my first show. My wife's in the audience. She said it was so quiet she could hear the tongue sticking to the roof of my mouth.
Wow.
She goes, it was like watching somebody get beat up and there's nothing you can do about it. So I have been through, you just put it on, to answer your question, you put it on automatic pilot. Because back in the day when I was doing that 2,629 night road trip with no home, just comedy clubs. Yep. My lovely wife came along for the ride. If you get on stage and there's 3 people in the audience, you have got to do your 45 or you don't get paid. So you just put it on autopilot and, just talk. You look at your watch. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much. That's my time. And, there are lines. A friend of mine, one of the comics, wasn't getting a good reaction. They seemed not to like him. And he goes, look, I know what you're doing. You're looking at me like a geek. I'm looking at you like a car payment. Okay. Yeah. So there have been many times where nothing. And it's odd because the same act the night before could have just torn the roof off the place. Sure. The world just shifted a little somehow. That is, and I tell them when I talk comedy, I told the comics, look, you don't get paid for the shows where you get a standing ovation. You get paid for the shows where you get nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it make you question what you do though when that happens?
Oh yeah, comics are that way.
Yeah.
Ask a comic. He or she will tell you you're only as good as your last show.
Yeah.
Well, and here's an extreme example of that. Tim Wilson, now deceased, but one of the funniest people on the planet. If you go to YouTube and type in Uncle BS,
okay,
that's a Tim Wilson bit. His uncle was everywhere anything happened in history. Oh, let's see. Dallas, Texas. November 63. What was I? Working in a book depository with a strange young man. I go up to the second floor and he's holding some kind of Italian rifle. And I said, I bet you can't hit a moving target with that thing. Yeah. Oh man, like and 9/11, September 11th. I'm working as a window washer on the World Trade Center.
Wow.
Everywhere, anything. So Tim did the Tonight Show and stayed at the Beverly Hilton with chocolate on his pillow. On note, thanks for staying with us, Mr. Wilson. The next night, he's in Dothan, Alabama, doing a horrible one-nighter. Korean woman banging on his door. You pay phone bill. You pay phone bill. So it's that, and he's saying to himself, I'm in the wrong business. That's how comics are. That's how speakers are. A good keynote speech, I can ride that for a couple of weeks. A bad one, I never forget. It's there. It always, I think of what I could have done. Matter of fact, I had one like that. And I said, look, I'll come back next year. All I'll charge is airfare. I just got to come back there and do it and do it well. And they said, thanks, but no thanks. Still haunts me to this day.
Wow.
And I know, go ahead.
Well, because it's highly personal. It's stuff that you're talking about about your life, but it's also your creation.
Yes, the problem was not my material. The problem was I was the last speaker, and I didn't know at the time that the opening speaker and the closing speaker are supposed to be a little lighter, even if it's this topic. But I thought I was supposed to be educating them, and I did some education. And another speaker in the audience said, "Frank, I was thinking standing ovation until you got into the teaching part." I thought to myself, "Oh, I wish I could tell him he's fucking up." Yeah, audience was polite.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing. If I have a bad corporate show, my thought is, yeah, you know what? I've done worse shows for less money. I just console myself.
Yeah. Of course, you could always just go out and say, hey, if you don't laugh at this, I'll kill myself.
Yes. Well, and I coach TEDx and I coach Making Money Speak. And only two of my deal is, my unique selling proposition is, I will work with you until you get your TEDx or until you get your speaking career where you want it, or we both die trying. It's a lifetime subscription. Two of my clients, only two, have said to me, Frank, that's great, but here's the deal. I want a separate clause in that contract that says you won't kill yourself before I get there.
Oh, there you go. Oh, well, brother, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your gift and gifts. And just, man, keep doing what you're doing, because you really are making a difference in a lot of people's lives.
No, my goal is to save a life a day. That's
yeah. Well, hopefully we've done that on this chat.
I imagine somebody out there probably has chronic suicidal ideation that they didn't know it had a name.
Now they do. Thanks to you, Frank King. My thanks to the mental health comedian Frank King for joining me. And my thanks to you for listening. You can check out Frank at www.thementalhealthcomedian.com. If you're struggling with depression or having suicidal thoughts, call the mental health hotline at 988. Or Frank has instructed me to give out his number, so you can call him at 858-405-5653. Frank told me he gets a call about every 2 weeks, meaning A, he's serious about calling him, and B, you're not the only one who needs help. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. Doing so may very well lead to your comment being mentioned in a future episode. And please share the Fuzzy Mic with your friends. As our Fuzzy following grows, the more indebted I am to you. To stay connected with the Fuzzy Mic, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. For video, please subscribe to the Fuzzy Mic YouTube channel. The Fuzzy Mic is hosted and produced by Kevin Klein. Production elements by Zach Sheesh at the Radio Farm. Social media director is Trish Klein. I'll be back next Tuesday with a new episode of The Fuzzy Mic.
That's it for The Fuzzy Mic. Thank you. The Fuzzy Mic with Kevin Klein.
Fuzzy Mike.